I would like to introduce to you now our speaker, if I can. Tonight we have Dr. Christopher Sharrett with us, and Dr. Sharrett will be discussing his grandmother, Margaret Sharrett's impact in Doylestown and the region through her medical and social advocacy of women. In the days long before legal birth control and few rights for women, Margaret Sharrett's medical background and progressive views navigated her in and out of court and legal arrest for her pro-abortion and pro-rights actions and voice. For over 60 years, her sheer commitment impacted the region and many of the residents in Doylestown. So this unique history has basically succumbed to loss due to the divergence within the family, which I believe Dr. Sharrett may address, and to also some of the social mores and conventional expectations. Margaret Sharrett was an amazing woman, ahead of her time, very much committed to helping women and the underserved. And we will hear a little bit about this tonight. Dr. Sharrett is a Professor Emeritus of Film Studies from Seton University. He's a contributing editor to Film International CINEASTE, is that correct? CINEASTE. He's the author of hundreds of essays, articles, and reviews for a variety of periodicals for over 45 years. He's been interviewed by CNN, Christian Science Monitor, WCBS, Arizona Republic, the CNBC, History Channel, and multiple media outlets. He's the author or editor of 6 books, including most recently a monograph on the TV series Breaking Bad.
I was born here in 1949, and I think about the town very often. And we come down here as often as we can, and I wax nostalgic for my days here. I sold our house on State Street, 120 East State Street in 1989. It's still there. It's maybe the ugliest house on the block, but it looks better now. If you drive down State Street until it becomes Court, and then drive down past the high school, on the opposite side of the road, there's a set of condos, and a sign says Chestnut Grove. It's not Chestnut Grove. Okay, Chestnut Grove is this. It's an antebellum mansion that my grandmother bought in 1920. Margaret Sharrett, Margaret Ford was the maiden name. My grandmother was born, we don't really know, because she and her 5 sisters lied a lot about their age. Although she died in 1976, my mother died in 1978. My grandmother was a trained nurse, trained in the 1890s, and then she went to Women's Medical College, where she was mentored by a man named Dr. Mears, who told her that women can't make any money as doctors, which makes you think, why is there a college, which is now gone. So by the time this conversation happened, sometime around the turn of the last century, she decided that women were only the subject of abuse by the medical profession run by men, as she was. And she, as a young woman, had been helping other women because she was very smart and knew something about science. And she helped women take care of their own bodies by examinations, including breast examinations. I mean, she understood then that there was something called cancer and it could kill women. And she also provided abortion when she was young. And she had one child, my father, Victor, in 1905. And she was divorced from a man named Joseph Sharrett in 1912. She worked out of an apartment on 1415 Mifflin Street in Philadelphia. And that became too much, and she was busted many times, but she never served a day in jail because she had the best criminal lawyer in Philadelphia, William Gray, with whom she had some kind of a affair going. She was last arrested in 1965, which is when I learned about everything, courtesy of the local papers and my erstwhile young friends. She was not put in jail then because she was up in years, although she continued to practice. And Chestnut Grove, she had the money for in 1920. She made a living out of this, no question about that, and there is an issue there, though she did some pro bono work, but she liked money too, so I can't make her into, a total saint. But she bought the house in Doylestown, and it turned into a hospital and a hostel where women came who were being pursued by men who wouldn't take no for an answer, some of whom tried to and actually did murder women. This became a working hospital with the help of Margaret's sister Catherine. In fact, somebody sent me an article from the local paper from 1925 or so, where the cops were after her and my Aunt Catherine, and nothing finally happened because of my grandmother's smarts. But she was arrested a number of times. It never paid off for them. The last time they tore the house apart in 1965, and found, among other things, all the books that she had. She had the records of thousands of people who came there, thousands of women looking for medical care and safe haven, including some famous personalities, pretty amazing. But she was probably the most famous woman doing that kind of work on the East Coast, at least. She had a staff of people in the 20s and 30s helping her. Some were trained nurses, some were helpers. She had people taking care of the grounds. The grounds were well manicured, with many, many trees, some of which were cut down because of the condos, which was a horrible loss, I thought. In 1968, she was stricken with some kind of dementia, and we had to put her into a nursing home on Maple Avenue, which is still there. It's not the same outfit, but it's there. That's where she died in 1976. By that time, then the house was gone, but during my childhood, Chestnut Grove became overgrown with shrubs and weeds of all kinds. The house itself was in terrible shape. I would call it the House of Usher, but I loved it anyway. She had orchards and arbors of grapes, trees, apple trees, pear trees. It was a paradise, for a kid to play in. But it was in bad shape by the 1960s, certainly. And by that time, it became the archetypal terrible house of a small town, the haunted house. And there were others, too. There was an old house at the top of Oakland Avenue toward the Catholic Church, which was in awful shape for a long time. But Chestnut Grove, it did look bad. When the house was finally torn down, there was an article in the Intelligencer by Lawrence Hall, who mourned the old house, but said that in its final years it was said to be used for darker things. I thought the only dark thing here is you, the author, you know. But that's the kind of thing that happened. And there were stories which I couldn't put together quite of my grandmother as a old witch, and God knows what else. But that's what happens, you know, in small town life. But she continued to practice up until her final illness. And I heard through my own research, really, that girls would come over there from the high school, and she would tell them to bring the boys, at which point she would read them the riot act about what it means to have sexual intercourse. You know? So she educated at least a few people, you know, young people. And she saved countless women from unwanted pregnancies. She did pelvic exams, as I found out. My dad, who knew everything, of course, and he was, as was suggested here by Donna, he was very nervous about this, very embarrassed, humiliated. He thought that our family was seen as a criminal crowd, like the Hatfields or somebody else, you know. I later learned from our attorney here in town, just our attorney, that my grandmother was seen as a real winner because she beat them all, as he said. She outsmarted every legal mind around her, the judges, of course, whatever. And I could see it. I mean, it made sense. But nothing could stop her. And family members asked her to please stop. My cousin Lillian, who is a wonderful person, very charitable person, said, please, Aunt Margaret, stop doing this. And she said, I'm doing this for women. Women are facing a war. And she said that, I figure now, as early as the 1940s. The war on women, we think of as a recent phrase, I guess. But she was conscious of it her whole life, and she would not be deterred by anything. My father was a baptized Catholic, although he was not very ardent in it, I think, but he was still embarrassed by his mother. My older brother became a priest. And this is a topic that he wants no part of, you know. He still loved her, he admired her in many ways, but he couldn't accept the idea of women having control of their own selves, you know. So for those who recall her, and I guess most of those people are long gone, I don't know. You people are, to me, really young looking, you know. But those who recall, you know, would think of her as the weirdo who lived down the road, who had this old house like Count Dracula's castle. I thought of that as actually being Henry Chapman Mercer's estates, which are now big deals. To me, they're places to go in the summertime to cool off in that old concrete. But no, she was, I think, I'm sure, she was seen as being a town oddball or a town criminal. And I wish the record could have been set straight, from my view anyway, a long time ago. But here we are now, you know. So I hope wherever she is that she's happy about somebody addressing her life. And I think that she'd be surprised it's me, because I was the baby of of everybody. I had a college friend who had a fling with a young woman in college and wanted me to intercede and contact my grandmother. I said, I don't want to get involved with this. I was a punk college kid. So I gave my friend her phone number, and he called her, and I was listening on the other phone in our apartment in the college. And my grandmother said, I need to have a name. And my stupid young friend went on and on. Oh, my girlfriend is, I did a terrible thing. And my grandmother said, I need to have a name. She was never anyone's fool, because she was baited many times and she knew that old trick. She and my father had a tough relationship. He was an only child. She was possessive of him, which meant that there was friction between she and my mother, which is an old story. That's really. My father was a lifelong conservative and an army officer in the Second World War, decorated. But he had this issue with his mother, and that was a complicated family situation, as all families are, I guess, some way or other. She, as I said, she had a staff during the heyday when there was money. Prior to, well, actually, things began to fall apart after World War II, after the 1950s. Or actually in the 50s. But I would see her with her khaki nurse's outfit on. Khaki was the color of the nurse back in the old days. And she would carry trays of food up the steps to the second or third floor, all the time. I said, where's that food going, Grammy? I thought there was a diner up there or something, And she would do that when I was there constantly. And she'd say, well, it's a friend who was just resting. Chestnut Grove goes back to the antebellum times. And it was used as a rest home for folks who were trying to leave Philadelphia, the heat of the city, come up there to, stay over. And she continued that, really, but with extra help, As I found out as time passed after I learned about it, courtesy of the local papers in '65, I asked my father various questions, and he said that she provided all of these services, food and shelter, and safekeeping from men who were out to get them, and same old story. It's nothing new. And I would ask dumb questions like, why were they out to get them? That's what I knew about the sexes. As I said, she had thousands and thousands of patients, and at the last arrest in 1965. The cops took everything, including books with entries of every patient. And she kept blood samples, too. See, she understood the law. Those books and everything else were taken by the police. And the last I knew, which was a long time ago, those books were in the hands of the courthouse up here. Now, I don't know if they were thrown out or what, but they were historic documents. Well, she would go into Philadelphia to see old friends, and she had a certain patriotic interest. Like she was a big celebrator of Flag Day. and she had Flag Day friends in the city, and they always met at the old John Wanamaker Tea Room, which is long gone, as is John Wanamaker's, but it was a pretty nice top floor dining room. And I've got photos of her in the center of the table. When my father went overseas in the Army, which that's a whole other set of stories. I mean, he wanted to really disabuse me of any notion of the romance of battle. But when he did that and came home, she was proud of her son, and she joined the Army Mothers Club. And she would always send letters or cards for Christmas and all, to us. His card was always Major Victor A. Sharrett, Major. And he would say, "What the hell? I've been out of the Army for 10 years, Mother. What the hell is this crap?" He had no interest in that stuff. He gave me all of his medals in a cardboard box and said, "Son, take this stuff." But she had a social life, but it was largely down there. I mean, she was known across the country as providing very good care by a smart woman in a house which in the 20s and 30s and 40s even, it was very posh, and she served meals, and she had servants bringing meals upstairs, and she had groundskeepers, cutting the bushes and all of that. So I found out over time in small fragments that she was widely known. And people always say to me, "You have a book here to write." I've heard that for, 72 years. But I don't know. She's buried in the Catholic cemetery, actually, right out here, the Lady of Mount Carmel. And my mother is buried not far away. She's buried next to a woman who actually donated the plot to her. And my father bought her a very small headstone. My father wanted to end the whole thing. It was tough on him. The answer that she gave every time that a family member would say, "Please stop, Aunt Margaret," and she said, "I'm doing this for women."